the topic and the speaker. Thereafter, you can take over.
Okay.
Another discipline is I will request all the listeners to put in their queries, questions in the chat box, and we will keep on monitoring it intermittently. I will definitely help you in that, but I will also request you to have a look at chat box as and when possible. Intelligence is something that really separates us, the human beings, from rest of the animals. And artificial intelligence is the simulation of human intelligence processes by machines, particularly computer systems. Nowadays, mobiles are also as smart and as good as computer systems. The specific applications of AI really include expert systems, video analytics, anomaly detection, predictive analysis, smart search and recommendations, virtual agents and assistants. In fact, Siri and Alexa are the best examples. So definitely AI is getting into our lives at a very high speed than expected. As we see the advantages, as well as, the new technologies always pose a risk. And definitely there will be statements that will be in favor, rather in against as well. For example, someone will say that the development of full AI could spell the end of human life. That is the extent to which AI is coming into our lives. But while we see multiple applications of AI, there are huge failures as well. I mean, to the extent that there had been lawsuits filed, there had been penalties levied, and those demands, for the sake of all the listeners, I will let you know the domains where AI has failed as well, because it is the experimentation that will go on. And that is why distinguished officers, researchers, professionals, industry representatives, team members, and dear all, welcome to this particular session on artificial reflections implications. And I was pointing out that artificial intelligence, even though is coming in our lives big way, there had been isolated cases of failures wherein there was a huge question mark against the technology. And those domains where AI failed, not all the times, but few of the times, include recognition of images, inadequate learning of multiple things, medical applications, access management based on face recognition, etc., fintech services, automobiles, and mechanical structures. I need not elaborate what kind of failure it was. For example, in case of automobile, it may be a car which is leading to an accident. In fintech services, it could be a advice given by a AI supported system to invest, and that advice may be going wrong. So those are the kind of failures. And for all these failures, we need to understand various perspectives of it, from law perspective, from the adoption perspective of these technology in day-to-day life. So all these things must be carefully analyzed. Meanwhile, I am getting a chat that voice is not clear. Hope my voice is clear. If not, we'll request you to kindly rejoin the meeting again. Perhaps that will take care of your problem. Thank you very much. For these discussions and analysis of this particular domain, we have someone from Young Brigade, Advocate Ajinkya Kurdukar, who had been practicing law since 2011. He is LLB plus company secretary and has expertise in corporate and commercial law, technology and technology, e-commerce and banking laws. So these are some of the domains where he specializes. That is where his expertise lies. And had been a speaker at TEDx for AI in legal services. Had been speaker for legal requirements for startups and entrepreneurs. Had been a panel advocate for SBI advisor as well as faculty at multiple universities and colleges, and has been judge for national level moot court competitions as well. So to understand various aspects of artificial intelligence and its reflections on the law, are we good enough in terms of law to face the challenges coming out of AI incidents and accidents? Let us hear straight away from Advocate Ajinkya Kurdukar. Please welcome him for this session. Thank you very much, Advocate Ajinkya, for joining this session. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those kind words. I'm very humbled by, and I really appreciate the way you introduced the topic. It's relatively a little complex topic, yet the aspects that you have touched upon and covered are the ones which are being deliberated across the globe. There are think tanks, there are philosophers who are, and there are technology experts who have been pondering and discussing these points. I'm going to touch upon some of the main aspects, some of the elemental points about artificial intelligence, and the discussion will include these 7 points. I'll just quickly touch upon those points. First will be basic introduction. Then we will be talking about applications of AI in terms of globally what applications are being used, and what and how is the Indian society, or how are the applications being put to use in India. We will be also discussing the key drivers for implementation, as in the way in which AI should be ideally implemented, and the points that we should keep in mind when we are implementing AI. We'll also be touching upon certain practical challenges in terms of implementation of AI. And at the end, we will be touching upon certain policies and regulations which are in existence currently, and the way countries are collaborating and shaking hands to use AI as a platform. So at any given point, if there is any question, of course, as was rightly pointed out, you can put it in the chat box. Or if you want to address a specific point, I don't mind being interrupted as well. And if my voice is cracking, if my video is flickering, just let me know immediately. No problem at all. So about AI, it's something that we all have been discussing. This is okay. Is this visible correctly?
Yes, this is visible.
Okay. Okay, so to start with, I want to use this quote by John McCarthy. He is regarded as the father of AI. That what is AI? He has defined it very beautifully. It is the science and engineering of making intelligent machines. So as Suhas rightly pointed out right in the beginning, that intelligence is what distinguishes us. It is a core. It is very specific to humans, and that has made us what we are today. However, gradually the machines are taking over, And our first introduction with AI, our first interaction with AI, perhaps, would have been with through Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm sure all of us would have watched his movie Terminator, and that's how we got introduced to AI. But it's a scene itself, and there are a lot many aspects of AI which need to be explored. Uh, Quickly going through the introduction part, it is so. What is AI? AI is just a capability to imitate the human brain, just a capability. Do not think of it as a machine in itself. It's an ability that is infused into a machine. It is a capability, or it's a platform that over which certain solutions are built. So try and understand of AI to be the soul of a machine, which will be guiding the functioning of that machine, right? So two very important aspects of AI. In fact, the two elements which make a machine an AI are autonomous and intelligent. So an AI has these two elements, essential elements, and without which it cannot be qualified as an artificial intelligent machine. So autonomous means that it functions on its own, and intelligent means that it can take its own decisions. So these two elements are very crucial, very important for any machine to be qualified as an AI. There are two basic types of AI, which is one is weak AI, one is strong AI. So weak AI is basically something which is designed for a specific purpose. For example, we all have come across chatbots, simple chatbots on various websites. So those simple chatbots are designed only to provide certain information to the user. There is no other function that they are doing. So that qualifies to be a weak AI. As against that, a strong AI would be a bigger machine, let's say a drone or a unmanned vehicle, which takes its own decisions in different demographics, in different circumstances, in different situations. So that the system which guides such machines is termed as a strong AI. This is a very fundamental and a very crude definition of distinguishing weak AI and a strong AI. However, I'm trying to break it down to the most simplest form so that we have a very clear understanding of what weak AI and strong AI is. Now, the most debatable topic, or rather the most talked about topic, discussed topic about AI is of having a legal or granting it a legal entity or a legal recognition or not. Because unless there is a legal personality attached to an AI, there is no liability that you can impose on an AI. So there are multiple discussions, there are multiple debates going on, there are certain philosophies which are being discussed across the globe, and there is no thumb rule, or there is no specific point, or there's no common understanding amongst people about its legal personality. And this concept, I believe, will evolve over the time as different countries come out with their own policies and their regulations to regulate how AI functions. Now, this is probably one of the most exciting topics that we will be discussing today. We'll be talking about how AI is being used as applications. And the first point that comes to my mind is face recognition. As Suhas also clearly mentioned, that face recognition is a very commonly used application, especially in investigations, during trials. Now, what this face recognition does is, we all know that there are multiple cameras, there are multiple recordings that happen, that CCTVs keep recording several incidents, and we are sitting in a pool of data. There are pictures, there are videos, there are short clips. Now, this pool of data contains so much information. However, to actually scan it through as an individual, as a person, it is highly impossible. It's very time consuming, it's labor intensive, and it can also have the risk of a human error. I mean, an individual cannot sit through for 24 hours and keep scanning through CCTV footages. So this is where AI comes into the picture. This is where AI comes to our rescue. What it does is, it has the ability to recognize faces Now, on the basis of the distance between the eyes or the facial structure, the facial hair, and there are other parameters on the basis of which this facial recognition system works. But the point to consider or the point to understand here is that facial recognition is one of the most common applications of AI, especially in terms of investigation. Now, in 2017, University of Texas had come out with a beautiful number. It suggested that the AI could identify an individual in less than 30 seconds, running through all the material that was fed in that AI. That means if there is, there are hundreds of videos through which you want to identify Mr. X, you have to configure or you have to tell the AI that this is what we are looking for, and it will scan through all the videos, all the 100 videos that it has, and this entire exercise it could do in a span of 30 seconds. So that means that the period for investigation, the long stretched investigation, is shortened by the use of this AI. Now, there are technologies which are exploring how the same system could be used in low light images or distorted images or videos. That is, I believe, something that that will happen in the times to come, because uh, that's a natural evolution how the technology will keep evolving. But for us, it is important to understand that facial recognition is one of the fundamental uses that the AI is being put to use. Second is scene understanding. Now, just imagine for a moment, you see an individual, okay, he enters a shopping mall, goes to the washroom, and he draws a pistol out of his jacket and he stores it somewhere in the washroom. Now, except for the fact that he's carrying uh, that pistol, that gun, which itself is an offense, there is nothing that he has done otherwise. For example, somebody's saying I'm not loud enough. Should I be louder?
I think you are good, advocate.
All
Please
right.
go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. So this person draws a pistol from his jacket, stores it somewhere in the washroom. Now he has not shot anyone. He has not killed anyone. He has not fired anyone. Now, if there was an AI which was installed and which was programmed to understand that if somebody is drawing a pistol, then that person should be flagged because that person may commit a particular crime. Then, in such a situation, the AI would have flagged, the AI would have raised an alarm, and that person could have been caught. Now, this sounds like a very filmy scene, but it's a very interesting position that before the crime or before the offense has actually occurred, that person has been identified, that person has been detained, and you have actually avoided occurrence of an event, right? So there's one study, or there is one research that is going on by Carter Research Labs in the US. This is under the guidance of the National Judicial Authority of US, and what they are working on is sound detection. Now, this is something very exciting. I was fascinated by this. Now, imagine a CCTV camera, which also has a small mic attached to it, and there occurs an offense. There are shots which are fired, and on the basis of that captured sound, the AI can assess and understand, recreate the crime scene. It can understand the distance, the firing distance. It can understand which gun was used. It can also understand whether the person who has used the gun was an amateur or an expert. It can understand under which weather conditions all this happened. And so all these things put together, I'm sure a lot of my learned friends who are into investigation would agree that if you get all these information right at the Panchanama stage, you will be able to crack the case, you will be able to investigate the case in a much faster manner. And the accuracy level will also increase, because you already have so much data and so much information, which is a processed information. So you don't have to keep finding or investigating on these aspects. You can very well step up your investigation and continue it further. So this concept or this research is going on in the US, as well as somebody from Gurgaon, a startup in Gurgaon, is also working on this aspect. I'm sure in the times to come they will evolve their technology with the time, and it will prove to be a game changer in my view, in the investigation domain at least. So scene understanding is recreating or understanding the details of a particular scene using the intelligence. And I'm sure the recent shootings in the US and the Musawala murder in India could be a great example where something like this could have been avoided if the scene understanding was put to use. A third is my favorite, the spider sense. So we all know that Spider-Man has this unique sense. He can figure out when an offense is being planned or it's about to happen. So crime forecasting is another use or another application of AI, where on the basis of existing data, the AI processes the data in such a manner that it identifies if there are any specific jurisdictions in which of offenses keep happening more often, if there are certain groups which are notorious, if there are certain if there is a certain period of the day where these groups get notorious, and it identifies those patterns, and on the basis of those patterns it can actually predict if there are going to be riots, if there are going to be activities of destabilization, if there are going to be mass crimes, or if there are going to be multiple crimes that are impending that will happen. Now, how this helps is, imagine that you get get an idea that there is a possibility of a riot happening in a particular area, a really nasty one, a really dangerous one. What you do is you immediately mobilize your firefighting departments, you mobilize your bomb squads, you mobilize your cops, you mobilize your security forces, everything at the right time, at the right place. So you are avoiding the time lag that may happen if you would not have had that information prior, or if you would not have had that information before the occurrence of that offense. Now that's why this is a very crucial one, or this is a very crucial application, because it will help the authorities to prevent happening of offenses, right? So a recent study that was conducted, it suggested that AI can reduce the crime or the crime rate by 30 to 40%, and the response time, the one that I was talking about, the response time by 20 to 35%. So it immediately helps you to mobilize the right departments at the right spot. So just to revise, we have discussed face recognition, scene creation, and crime forecasting as some of the main applications of AI. Now, uh, what is the world doing about AI? Are there any specific examples that we can understand? So, quickly running through some of the main examples which I could come across is Singapore. In Singapore, they've deployed UAVs. So now UAVs are unarmed aerial vehicles. All of us, especially the ones in defense, are aware about it. What they have done is these UAVs are programmed to understand the behavior of crowd. If there is any violence, if there is any mob which may create violence, the AI is programmed to assess those situations and to intimate the right authorities at the right time. So this again, as we discussed crime forecasting, this can in fact be helpful for the departments, for the authorities, to avoid certain dangerous situations. So, and the same country and the same system is also put to use in terms of immigration. So now what happens is, if there is land immigration, if there is sea immigration, you have deployed these UAVs which are trained or which are programmed to assess the entire immigration processes and to take decisions. So if they have found someone who is an illegal immigrant, who probably does not possess the right papers or does not possess the right permits, that person can be immediately stopped from entering the country, and the department or the concerned authorities can also be immediately informed about this. And moving on, there is also a very interesting robo that has been deployed by the authorities in Singapore. It reminds people to pull up their masks and to maintain social distance. Similarly, Japan, Brazil, and even the US have been very active in terms of harnessing the power of AI and putting them to use, because again, AI has to be put to use with a specific purpose. You cannot just let loose a robot and tell him to take 10 different decisions on different situations. So one thing you will read whenever you study about AI more is that there are defined solutions when one is programming in AI. So in Japan, we have an AI for crime investigations and repeat criminals. In Brazil, again, to monitor crimes across areas, jurisdiction-wise, location-wise, and security assessments. So now, ये तो हो गई विदेश वाली बात. What is happening in India? Some really interesting stuff is happening in India in terms of AI. Well, this is Jarvis. So this system, what it does is it generates useful information using CCTV footage on real time. Something that we discussed in the previous slide is the AI. It runs through the videos, it runs through the CCTV footages over the long CCTV footages, and it generates useful and relatable information from that footage. Now, that information can be utilized by the investigating agencies in their pursuit. So basically, it is essentially reducing the hard work, or it is reducing the stress over these investigating authorities. Right. So, in fact, this Jarvis has been put to use in Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, and Telangana. Another similar application is police artificial intelligence system. It is being put to use by the Punjab police. And what it does is it does face search, the first point that we discussed. It does text search and a database of over 1 lakh criminals. So this will help them assess if there are any repeat offenders, right? So this will help them assess the patterns of offenses, because they already have a database of over 1 lakh offenders. And the last one, in my view, it is my favorite one. It was Kaizala app. And what this app does is very interesting. So let's say my friend here is driving through the road, and he spots a pothole there. What he has to do is he just has to click a picture of that pothole. Now, it's not just clicking the picture and putting it on the BMC website or the municipal corporation website. What it does is you upload that image on the app, and now the intelligence of that app identifies that a pothole is on that road, and that road is the responsibility of a particular department. So it intimates that particular department about that pothole. You may have come across a lot of apps where you are uploading the picture, and the picture as it is being uploaded on their website, that hey, there is a pothole there, do something about it. But what this app does is it is an intelligent app. It's not just a smart app. So what it does is it captures that picture and it posts it to the relevant department. Now, I mean, there's no point in posting that picture with the police department, right? You have to post it to the works department. So this is the smartness, this is the intelligence that the app has, right? So there are multiple other startups, in fact, in the drone industry, in medicine, in logistics, that have been doing some remarkable and groundbreaking work using the AI technology. But due to paucity of time, I'm not touching on those examples, but these are the ones which caught my eye and I thought I should be discussing these. Being a lawyer, I have been very impressed with the kind of attitude that the judiciary has displayed towards AI, the kind of accepting attitude that the judiciary has displayed towards AI. Retired Justice Bobde was also very vocal about it. He quoted during the Constitution Day 17th Constitution Day event that I quote, AI can improve the judicial system's efficiency through sophisticated and contextual automation of existing non-judicial tasks and functions. Now, this is very relevant, and I think I can totally relate to what he's trying to say, because even during the judiciary, even during our practice, we come across multiple such situations where the work is very clerical, right? So such kind of activities can definitely be taken care of by the AI. Uh, we can cite examples of filing a case before the court, which involves a lot of clerical work. So that part of the job, that that part of the work of the department can be handled by AI. So in April 2021, the Supreme Court had launched its AI portal. Very interesting. I mean, people kind of always say this, that the judiciary is very primitive in its functioning. But in April 2021, the Supreme Court launched its AI portal called SUPACE, which is Supreme Court Portal for Assistance in Courts Efficiency, to leverage machine learning and to aid the scrutiny of cases and address existing bottlenecks. Because the fact is that at the time of filing, at the time of retrieving the documents, there's a whole set of activities that we have to go through. We have to interact with a lot of departments, a lot of individuals. That entire exercise can be avoided, guys, right? So that's why and in fact the courts during its judgments also have been very vocal, have been very open about discussing AI. I've just cited three judgments, wherein in one of the judgments, the Karnataka High Court discussed the use of AI based facial recognition software. So the first point that we discussed, right? So facial recognition software to be put to use, and this was in 2006. So it's a very long-term fight, long-term battle that we've had, and long-term exercise that we all are going through. The courts have time and again reiterated the use, the efficiency, and the value of artificial intelligence. Now, it's a brilliant quote. I'll just read it out. Technology is not good or bad, right? Technology is neutral. The question is, how are we using it? Technology doesn't build relationships, it doesn't build trust. People do. You can only add the technology once you have the trusted relationship in place. I have always been a strong advocate of the concept that AI is nothing but an enabler. And when I say this with a very interesting example. This example I'd read in 2017. So imagine, so we all know that consuming alcohol and driving a vehicle is an offense in most parts of the country, in most parts of the world. Now, but still, there are some people who commit that offense. Now, just imagine there's a car, it has a driver's seat, and the moment you open the door and sit in the driver's seat, the first thing that the car does is it assesses if you have consumed alcohol or no. And if you have consumed alcohol, the car won't start in the first place. It's just such a simple technology which could change the course of the Motor Vehicles Act. It could change the course of how there are traffic jams due to the constant checkings. it will reduce the burden on our security forces, reduce the burden on our police. That is why it is. That's why I have always been advocating the statement that AI is nothing but just an enabler. It can never replace a human being. It can only enhance the functioning of how the society functions. Coming back to the key drivers for implementation. So now we have interestingly discussed how the applications are being applied, how AI is being used across the world in different parts of the country, in India as well. So now there are certain uh, key drivers, in my view, to ensure that AI is being implemented in the right manner, in the right spirit. How does that work? Now, first thing first, maintaining an equilibrium, maintaining a balance between the purpose of that AI and the civil liberties. Privacy is still one of the biggest concerns slash threats to AI. And that's why there has to be a complete balance, equilibrium between the purpose of that AI as well as the civil liberties. So when I say civil liberties, it includes expression, it includes right to life, it includes right to movement, multiple other rights. So this equilibrium has to be maintained, and that should be the driver for implementation of AI, right? So the first point that we have discussed is there should be an equilibrium. Then there should be a gradual experimentation and implementation. So now AI is going to be a complete game changer for the society. It's new. Nobody knows how it works and nobody knows how it will grow. So instead of coming out with a solution, coming out with a AI product suddenly out of nowhere, it should be a gradual exercise, right? The departments, the government, or the authorities should in fact first educate people, first tell them how AI does, what AI does, how it functions. I'm not getting into the technicalities of it, but the application of it, right? And then gradually implement instead of a knee-jerk movement, because it will backfire, it will adversely affect the society. People already have a little adverse or a negative view about AI, because they have this feeling, because of the, of course, because of the movies, and because they believe that AI is going to replace them. AI will replace them as employees, AI will replace them as professionals, and that's why they are running away from it, right? So the process should be gradual and stepwise. Third, and perhaps one of the most important parts of the drivers for implementation should be the accountability and transparency of the code. Now, how a particular system functions is equally important to be disclosed, because unless that procedure is disclosed to people, people will not be able to build trust with that procedure. Right. So what I'm trying to say here is that if there are certain AI projects in the pipeline which are being put to use by the government, those codes or those algorithms or those technical data should be made public, and there should be accountability to it. So there should be certain authorities, adjudicating authorities, who will act as who will help people, assist in terms of grievances, something like a banking ombudsman or something like an adjudicating authority for consumer redressal forums. These are the authorities which have judicial control over processes, right? So we need to have a board, or we need to have a certain adjudicating authority to govern functioning of AI. So tomorrow, if I am an affected party, if I have certain grievance pertaining to the working of an AI, I should be able to knock the doors of that authority, of that board, right? So accountability, transparency, principles. So NITI Aayog has in fact come up with a paper, with a research paper, and in that research paper they have very specifically pointed out that there are certain drivers, or there are certain aspects which we should consider before coming out with policies for governing AI. Safety and reliability, equality, inclusivity, accountability and transparency. We have discussed this before, but and NITI Aayog research paper discusses these points in details right to the grassroots level. So moving further, AI and criminal liability. So my lawyer friends, my dear friends from the police and the authorities would agree that the basis of any criminal jurisprudence is this statement: actus non facitrium. It's a Latin maxim. Actus non facitrium nisi mensit rea. That means an offense constitutes of the mens rea, that is the mental element, and the actus reus, the physical element. Now, in the first slide itself, we had discussed that there is no legal personality. Okay. There is no legal personality in terms of AI, and that is a big challenge. That is a big challenge for governing, or that is the big challenge. That is the biggest challenge for regulating an AI, right? So the criminal liability in terms of AI can be categorized in three categories, right? So the AI does not or may not have a mens rea. There is no mental element to it. Actus reus is the actual offense, right? So let's take an example of a gun which is programmed to shoot, right? So the gun shoots anybody who comes who comes in between the gun and a gate, right? So it shoots Mr. X, Mr. Y, Mr. Z, Mr. A, Mr. B. Anybody who crosses that gate, the gun shoots because it's programmed to do something like that. In that case, the programmer or the author of that code should be held liable. This is like a vicarious liability. Now, if the gun is programmed to shoot Mr. A and it shoots Mr. B, so there is some error, there is some fault in that program. Again, the programmer should be held liable. Why? Because he has told the gun what to do and he has not told the gun what not to be done. What not is to be done. Right? So first is when the gun is completely innocent. The second situation where it is partly innocent, in that case as well, the programmer has to be held liable. In the third situation, where the gun is extremely intelligent, अभी वो अपने programmer का भी नहीं सुनती है. It's on its own and it starts randomly shooting people. Then it is only the gun which should be held liable. Right? So how do we punish AI? Can we put it in jail? No, it's a capability. How do we put it in jail? What can be done, however, is we can delete the software, we can suspend the software, right? So these are the ways in which an AI can be produced, can be punished. See, understand, it's an evolving jurisprudence, right? So there is no conclusive way where AI can be punished. There is no specific law which tells us that this is how the AI should be punished. But these are some options that we may consider. What's this? Sorry. Now coming.
Mr. Ajinkya, before
Yeah.
going to the next slide,
Yeah.
based on these discussions, do you see any changes in the law in coming years? Or do you know any example wherein the law has been already modified?
Oh, in fact, yes. In terms of the Indian law, as I said, it is only on the instruction of the judges that such AI is being put to use. But in terms of admissibility of the evidence, we are still being governed by the previous old unamended acts. So what I see is that there will be certain amendments in the Evidence Act, in the Information Technology Act, and these regulations will consider use of AI as an evidence collecting mechanism. So I very strongly believe, and there are legal experts. For example, Honorable Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, the the judge before the Supreme Court, as well as some other judges, have been very vocal about constructing certain policies where the evidence collected by AI can be put to use or can be admissible in court. But now, as on date, we do not have any regulation. As on date, we do not have any law. But I'm sure in the times to come, we will have certain specific laws where such information can be considered by the courts.
Thanks a lot. Please proceed.
May I proceed? All
Yeah,
right.
sure.
Now we are coming to a very interesting and one of the most important topics in terms of challenges that AI faces. Now, there's this word called bias, and my friend Suhas also had discussed about this in the introduction. Now, what is bias? Bias is basically an absence of fairness, right? So now I will tell you two small stories, quick stories. One is a very popular one by Amazon. In fact, Amazon had extended a public apology after this. What happened is Amazon had developed an AI for hiring purposes, for resource hiring purposes. Now, what happened is that that AI was flooded with CVs from only male participants or male candidates. Initially, it was flooded by so many CVs, and those belonged only to male candidates. So, what happened was the AI started reprogramming itself to believe that only men can be hired in terms of um, engineering positions. Now, what this means is the AI thereafter started declining, rejecting CVs from female candidates. See again, it's autonomous and it's intelligent. Therefore, what it started to believe is that only men can be engineers. Only men can be engineers, and that's why only men engineers or male engineers should be hired. And that's why the AI started completely outrightly rejecting female CVs. Right. So this is what bias is. There was an error in the crafting that algorithm. There was an error in the program, and this is how it escalated. This is how it started behaving. Another small example would be there was a bot, right? So we all know what a bot is. We see that on the websites. Now, what happened is when there were many people who started using unparliamentary language with that bot. Multiple people out of 100, let's say 90, 95 people started using abusive language with that bot for whatever reasons. The bot started training itself that this is actually the right language, right? And it started responding in a similar language because it started training itself that if 90%, 95% people are using such a language, then probably this is what normal language is. And then it started using the same language with all its users. So this again is a bias. So bias is, and this is, and a bias is almost certain to be there in an AI program, because at the end of it, we all know that an AI is programmed by an individual, by a set of people, by a set of experts, right? Data privacy, one of the greatest threats to AI, as we discussed about that equilibrium of the purpose of AI and the civil liberties, right? So data privacy can be a big challenge, and to avoid that or to address, to deal with it, systems like anonymization and de-identification can also be used. So basically, you are using the patterns but not disclosing the identity of those people. Okay, so if there are 100 people visiting a restaurant and ordering some food, you are assessing, the AI assesses what they are ordering, on which days they are ordering certain food, what is the time, so on and so forth, without actually disclosing the identity, right? So de-identification is a method in which you can protect the privacy as well as put the AI to use. Misuse of AI, I'm sure you all will agree that in the past few years there have been extreme threats of cyber attacks, extreme threats of AI attacks, and something called adversarial AI. Now, what this does is it confuses the AI, right? So if there is an AI, this adversarial AI can be like a malware, can be a set of programs. It confuses the AI and it contaminates the data. So AI derives all its strength from the data it is provided, right? If there is some error with the data or if there is some contamination in the data, the AI is bound to be misused, right? So that's why if someone wants to disrupt the functioning of that AI, simple way is to contaminate the data. So this again is a big threat which needs to be addressed. And technology and infrastructure bottlenecks, it requires, so artificial intelligence programming and functioning requires a lot of computing power, a lot of system power. It requires experts, it requires domain experts. So we need to have some schools, or we need to have such infrastructure which ensures that more and more people are made domain experts in terms of AI. And there are climate related issues or challenges as well, where if we are using too much of computing power, I'm sure we all know that in that case, in that pursuit, we are also generating a lot of heat. We are acting against the climate change policies. So again, these issues need to be very severely, very uh, fundamentally analyzed, assessed, and cured. Only then we will have a situation where the AI is not just effective but also sustainable. Right. So moving on.
Mr. I think, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. Here is a question. Who
Yeah.
will be responsible if AI takes wrong decision? This is has been posted.
Yeah.
Even though you have directly, indirectly answered that
Yeah.
question, but still we are interested in knowing whether what is your opinion on this?
In my view, AI as on date cannot be held liable. It is the programmer or the author of that AI who will be held liable. And it also largely depends on the wrongdoing and the circumstances, because we do not recognize AI as a legal entity today. So there is no way that an AI can be held liable directly. There is
So,
only a
so
vicarious liability.
So does that mean, let us say, if certain software, certain piece of software is coming from XYZ company,
Mhm.
that XYZ company will be responsible for the problem?
Most certainly. That's precisely what I mean.
Okay.
They being the author of the algorithm, of the software, of the code, they will be the ones who will be held liable.
Thank you very much, because this is one question from Shitol Dheeraj which had come.
Yes.
I will request everyone to put in your questions as well. One more question has come from Arsha. What
Mhm.
about the liability of the user?
Liability of the user. So
Yeah.
that's a very good question. Actually, there is no specific liability of a user. I mean, it's something as basic as using an infrastructure, something as basic as using the flyover or any civil infrastructure. So there is no liability that I see. Yes, there are certain responsibilities that the user should follow, and those will be perhaps similar ones that we have for using the internet, using the softwares, using the technology. So I don't see any liabilities as such.
And another, corollary to what is getting discussed is
Mhm.
if there is a corrupt program for some reason.
Correct. Correct. So Suhas, in that case as well, if the program is corrupt or if there is some irregularity with fault with the program, then again it's the author who will be held liable and responsible for it, primarily because the AI is functioning on the basis of the code that was crafted by that author. So therefore, there is typically no liability that will come to the AI directly, and it will be the liability of the author or of the coder who has coded that AI.
Okay. Will a disclaimer help? Let us say if it is a car manufacturing company or a kind of robo which is coming out from an organization, if they put a disclaimer saying that if at all any malfunction happens, is not responsibility due to operating conditions. So will that save the organization?
No, that won't, because in India especially, we have something called strict liability.
Okay.
Now, the concept of strict liability is, even if you have taken enough care in avoiding a disaster, in avoiding that situation, and if an adverse situation occurs, you still will be held liable, and a simple disclaimer or a disclosure will not be of any use or will not help you run away from your liability. Something something like the Bhopal gas tragedy or something,
Correct.
you know.
Correct.
So those are the situations where a disaster has happened, and even if there was a disclosure or a disclaimer, still it would not save you from the liability, because you are you are
Correct.
under that strict liability to ensure that something like that doesn't happen, and if it
Thank you.
happens, then you are liable.
Thank you very much, Advocate. Please proceed.
Yeah. Just on the last part of the discussion, uh yeah, regulations and policies. Now, there are multiple nations who are coming up with their versions of policies, their versions of regulations, and all of it is still in pipeline. There is nothing substantial that has come up yet, but it will in the next couple of years. And the way countries are functioning is that they are collaborating. For example, India and UAE have signed an agreement in 2018. In fact, I have just observed in 2018 there were multiple uh, cross-country agreements that were executed. So there was an agreement between the European Union, the countries of the European Union, United Nations, North Baltic region, and so on and so forth. What they are trying to do is they are trying to collaborate, exchange AI technology, and also additionally encourage AI technology by promising investments. Because it's a gradual process, it's still at the nascent stage, growing stage. People want that kind of support, cross-border support, in terms of investment, in terms of technology, in terms of promised businesses. And that's why the countries are collaborating, they are shaking hands over all these issues. And to give you one more example, this is the last point. To give you an example, the NITI Aayog has also come up with a brilliant research paper. In fact, last year when they had released it, I had read, both the papers. It was so interesting. It was so enriching, and it gives us the perspective that the NITI Aayog has towards this entire concept, or towards this world of AI. So I would highly recommend everyone to go through the research paper by NITI Aayog, and there are certain interesting research papers published by the ministry itself, and I'm sure those will also be of a lot of help. And I believe in the times to come, the way the legislation is dynamic to consider the upcoming trends and technologies, I'm sure in the times to come, they will come up with certain set of regulations and policies to govern the functioning of AI. And as I mentioned previously, also in the NITI Aayog report, they have very categorically and very beautifully put forward the principles which should govern these policies. So that's why it's important to understand those principles, so that the policies will be uh, the policies should be governed, or the policies should be inspired from those principles. That's about it from my end. I think I've touched upon most of the topics, most of the points that I wanted to discuss. And you've been a brilliant audience. Yeah, it was so much fun and such an honor. And I'm totally open for questions.
Thank you very much. I mean, great, Mr. Ajinkya. Thank you very much for this discussion. There could be some more questions coming in, but again, based on this policy, I know for sure that there is a drone policy by Government of India. Likewise, in your knowledge, is there any AI for public use policy by Government of India? In your knowledge?
No, not in my knowledge, and there is no specific policy as such that has come through. In fact, I mean, we have certain regulations by SEBI in terms of using AI for trading. That was in 2019, 2020. But a holistic policy or a holistic regulation is still in the pipeline, and the departments and the ministries are functioning together on crafting such policies.
Okay, thank you very much. In fact, I will appeal to everyone. If you have any question, please put it in the chat box so that we can discuss. Meanwhile, thank you very much, Advocate Ajinkya Kurdukar, for your enlightenment on this particular interesting subject. In fact, perhaps you all will agree that artificial intelligence has the same relation to the intelligence as artificial flowers have to flowers. So I believe even intelligence, I mean, will keep on separating us from artificial intelligence. No replacement for intelligence. We need not worry. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Esteemed and distinguished officers, researchers, professionals, and team members. Thank you very much for joining the session. Next month, we will come out with another interesting topic for discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm highly obliged.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot.